Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Major General Garrett McGee, Acting Director, Cybersecurity, CIO G6, and Brigadier General J.P. McGee, Deputy Commander, Operations, Army Cyber.
Hey, we do have a couple of chairs in the front here, and I see a lot of people standing around in the back, so please feel free to come on in, Rob, and Colonel Miles, and Colonel Oliver. Hey, well, good afternoon, and we're going to talk about cybersecurity, and so I'll go through the construct of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk a little bit about what we've done so far with respect to cybersecurity from a people, process, and technology standpoint, where we're going. We'll touch upon how maybe industry can help us out in this area. We'll talk a few Q&As, and then we'll wrap it up in 30 minutes. But let me give it over to JP to do a little self-introduction.
Okay, I'm Brigadier General J.P. McGee. I'm the Deputy Commanding General for Operations for Army Cyber Command. My background has been as an infantry officer. I've been in Cyber Command now since last July, so pretty much everything I'm going to talk to you about this afternoon, I've learned in the last 15 months. And so if I can learn this stuff, anybody can. I put that out there as an upfront. So, sir, back to you.
Well, you don't give yourself enough credit. He's been through quite a bit this past year and a half with Army Cyber as the DCG for operations. And so we all remember in 2014 the Sony cyber attack, right? And we all kind of attributed that to some other nation state. And so hence the title, cyber attacks are, in fact, borderless. In fact, borderless. And so since then, a lot has happened, not only to the commercial sector, but to the government sector. We've always known that this has been happening, but that in 2014 is when we kind of saw that at a very public, overt scale, and got our attention. And quite frankly, it's like the dog that caught the car, right? We've been saying for years we need to be better at cybersecurity, lock down our systems, and then when that happened, oh my goodness, it really does happen. And so since then, we've been getting after it. So we're going to talk a little bit about people, process, and technology. And so I'm going to ask General McGee here, what have we been doing on the people front for cybersecurity or cyber?
So for people, I think a lot of people don't realize how much the Army has invested in terms of people, and then in some terms just money to make the Army effectively very effective in cyberspace operations. So the Army's done a number of things, and in this it makes it unique amongst the services. So first off, they've created their own cyber branch. Okay, so they decided that it was going to be an equivalent branch to infantry, armor, aviation, any of the other branches. And what that allows us to do is to, at a young age, bring in an officer, an enlisted soldier, and then eventually bring in warrant officers, and they can stay in that track the entire time. With the other services, their cyber professionals and cadre are normally coming out of their signal or their intelligence corps. And so for them to remain competitive, they'll do a job in a cyber field, and then they'll go back to the intel field or signal field, and then they'll come back into the cyber field. And if you can imagine a 4-year, 3-year gap of assignments before you're in it, you can see how having someone who begins in cyber and then stays in cyber throughout a career, how that gives you a tremendous advantage. So the cyber branch is really, really critical. The second is we've created a cyber school down at Fort Gordon. So it's part of the Cyber Center of Excellence. There's a cyber school and a signal school commanded by Brigadier General Neil Hersey, who's around here somewhere. And that has become really a state-of-the-art, and it's growing very rapidly. A lot of money is being invested to make this a state-of-the-art training facility that's not just training Army's cyber operators, but of all services now, as they're identifying what a great place that is for us to be able to go. And in some other ways, it may be not quite as apparent, but the Army has invested big in terms of personnel in other ways. And so there is a requirement put upon each of the services for us to have an operational headquarters to help synchronize support to the combatant commands. And for the Army, our 3 combatant commands that we support are NORTHCOM, CENTCOM, and AFRICOM. So you can imagine the responsibilities associated with that. The Army invested 129 people to do that mission full-time. And so their full-time job down at Fort Gordon, Georgia, is to focus on their support to the combatant commanders. None of the other services have paid at that level, and most of the people who are doing those jobs for the other services are doing that on a dual hat or triple hat capacity. And then really for the last few years, we've been spending a lot of time on building the force. The Army's met all their goals and now has 21 cyber mission teams and 20 CPTs that have been established, and we're looking forward to building another 21, 11 in the National Guard and 10 in the Reserve. So in the people, the Army has really invested a tremendous amount, and they've been able to use the size of the Army to really match the size of the challenge, and I think they're continuing to grow. And the final piece, and with great support from the Army staff and all elements of the Army, some significant work on cyber talent management and how we treat this field uniquely and not just like every other branch within the Army. And so that's an evolving process as we're going forward, but there's been great support for us to have innovative human resources processes to allow us to remain competitive against adversaries in this space.
Thanks, JP. And to my understanding, with General Hager sitting in front of us here, I guess, the Army does do a great job when compared to the other services, leading the way, putting the people and the resources into it to establish what you just described. Let's just talk a little bit about process, and at a high level, I guess. And so, can you talk about Army Cyber becoming an ASCC and how some of the changes have happened recently to give Army Cyber the authorities that it needs to be an operational command?
So I think what is the biggest change is in the beginning of this year is we were given what was called a directive authority for cyber operations, which means if you operate on an Army network, Army Cyber has the authority to give you, instructions about what you're doing on the network, what systems are on the network and are not. And where that comes into play, most routinely is just the daily running of the network. But where it is really, really important is in the face of a crisis or a significant attack, like we experienced in May during the WannaCry attacks against our network. And so what it allowed us to do is, with authority, to direct quarantines of systems, to be able to do engineering patches, and to do engineering sort of management, architecture management, to minimize the threats to our network. But at a certain point within our response to the WannaCry, we had quarantined off 102,000 Army systems because we thought that they provided an unacceptable level of vulnerability to our networks. And what it allows us to do is to operate within cyberspace as if it's the land domain or the sea domain or the air domain. But it gives a commander, Lieutenant General Paul Nakasone, our cyber commander, the ability to direct and dictate actions within this operational domain. And it's an evolving field that is truly very interesting.
And can you also talk about the regional cyber centers and how they're now aligned to Army Cyber? What does that do for you?
Absolutely. So underneath Army Cyber Command, we have 5 regional cyber centers, each commanded by a lieutenant colonel. So there's one in Korea, there's one in Hawaii, there's one for the continental United States at Fort Huachuca, there's one in Germany, and there's one in Kuwait. And they are in charge of the regional cybersecurity of those networks. And they work very closely with the signal units to make sure that they're run effectively and run securely. And there's great symbiotic relationship between the signal units that are out there and the regional cyber centers as they work together with common cause to make sure the networks are defended well, resilient, and able to sort of repel any attacks.
And kind of a final process question, what about the CCRI process, the Command Cyber Readiness Inspections? How have they changed or evolved?
So the CCRI process is this fairly onerous attempt by the Army and by the other services as well, mandated, and it's to get us from a very low level of overall cybersecurity, or this term that people use called cyber hygiene, and at all levels raise up our levels. And if you can imagine how hard that is to do on the network that the Army has, 1.2 million users, disparate networks all around because of the way that the networks were built for the last 20 or 30 years, sort of in enclave and post by post, they came up differently. So it combines technical measures, it combines physical security measures, and the idea is to get the Army to a baseline of standards, and then on that we're going to continue to build, and we're trying to figure out what reflects true cyber security readiness and sort of operational readiness for a network that's so important. But the first step is this CCRI process that we've done with significant advance warning at first to get all the units brought up, and now we're doing it in a much more robust, more rapid, little to no notice before they show up and start doing these checks to make sure that everyone's compliant. So a lot of work by all post camps and installations across the Army to increase the overall security of the network.
Well, thanks, JP. So we talked a little bit about people, a little bit about the processes that we have in place, and we'll talk just a little bit about technology. And this is not like some, exquisite technology that we'll be talking about. We're talking about some very basic, fundamental things that we've been doing over the past couple of years. and we'll continue to move forward. The first one that I will get out of the way is endpoint security, which is, in another name, Windows 10. And so that struggle is real. That's a moniker that my boss had put together just a couple of months ago when we started getting back into the Windows 10 migration effort. And so by the end of March 2018, the Army will have been migrated to Windows 10 for all the Office IT systems. And so that is something that we know that Windows 10 has a much more secure endpoint capability for us. And so that's one of the things that we're doing. We're also undertaking two other major efforts that we've had underway for some time. One of them is a very basic upgrade of the installation campus area network. We've been doing that for a few years now, and we will continue doing that for a few years until we are done with this first round of ICANN installation campus area network upgrades. What does that do for us? It replaces all the old switches and routers that are STIG compliant, because each device is a cybersecurity vulnerability for us. Each has a way for an insider or outsider to get into the network, and so locking down the infrastructure there is paramount to securing our network. So in effect, we are using the term hardening our network by upgrading the installation campus area network. The other thing that we've been doing now for 2 years, but this effort started like 5 years ago, is migration to the joint regional security stacks. You heard about it, and we actually started doing it a year and a half ago. We've now migrated over 100 installations behind the joint regional security stacks. And what's a JRSS? It's a firewall on steroids. So all those installations that used to have separate points of presence into the internet are now behind these large, very sophisticated, high-powered joint regional security stacks. And so that effort has been ongoing for the past 2 years in an active migration effort, and we will continue to do that. And in doing so, we are shrinking our cybersecurity footprint with respect to outside connectivity to the open internet. So those two things underway: installation campus area network upgrades and migration to the joint regional security stacks. We have a number of other efforts underway, more technical, but we're not going to talk about those today. We're going to talk just a little bit about, because we get this question all the time, how industry can help us. Now, and I'll just start with one, and I'll get over to JP, and you may be able to maybe provide a tip or two. But one thing I always ask our industry partners to do is get to know us. Get to know how we are challenged in what we're doing. And so I've walked around the last couple of days, a lot of great solutions, very close to problems we have. But it would be better if it was a solution to a problem that we had, right? So get to know us. Get to know our unique problem set for the Army, because we are a little different than the Navy and the Air Force. And so what works for one service may actually work for us, but it may require some adaptation, because we may do things a little bit uniquely compared to our sister services. More and more, we are doing things alike. But if you can get to know us, then I think we'll be in a better position to work together. JP?
So I'd just say, what does technology can do to help us? I mean, what is interesting for me, on my perspective in this, is that much of the expertise, and certainly the vast majority of the research and development money that goes into running networks, providing cybersecurity, that is all predominantly in the civilian sector. It's not to say we don't have expertise, but most of the R&D money, like to a huge degree, is now being spent in civilian. So part of our responsibility is being able to bring these technologies over from the civilian industry, which is innovating so rapidly, and make them effective for our space. But I think last year the Department of Defense total R&D budget was about $15 billion, and the whole U.S. just tech industries was around $500 billion. So $15 to $500 billion. So you can see where the cutting edge stuff is. So it's not a question of, it really is a question of how we integrate this most effectively, not if we have a choice. Because if we don't, we'll be absolutely ineffective. So that's the piece, and as General Yee says, not just what you're selling, but how does it uniquely support us, our networks, and our unique missions, which might be a little bit different than what the civilian world is looking for. And I think the other piece, back to the people, is how do we develop those pathways where people from industry can come into the military, spend some time, work with us, and then go back to industry and make that a more porous process by which we're able to leverage that talent, they're able to work with us, and then they can go back to that, which I think in the long run is what we want to be able to achieve, to have the best people working for the Army when we're doing these cyber operations.
Great point. 2 quick tips. One of which is play nice with each other. Now, know your competitors, but when we ask, hey, are you interoperable or who do you work with, we need to know that, because if we put that on our network, it has to work with the other stuff that's on our network, all right? And then number 2, don't just engage with the G6 or with Army Cyber or with NetCom. Engage with all of us, the PEO, Army Cyber, CRG6, NetCom, all the stakeholders, so that we all have a good shared understanding of a capability that we may need for our network. That's it for tips. How much time do we have for questions? We have about 10 minutes for questions. All right, so any questions out there? Go ahead. Sir, we have a mic.
Gentlemen, Major Mark Fontaine, JIDO. I have a question. What are we looking to do as far as getting after ICS SCADA? For example, if somebody is able to compromise an air conditioning system to a data center, we might have a problem. What are we doing to get after that, sir?
So DoD, CIO does have a standing working group, which is actually very focused on ICS SCADA and other platform IT systems in terms of, hey, what's the problem, define the problem, and then let's work on the requirements to secure those systems, which for years may not have had the same level of scrutiny or oversight, but now it's coming. And so there's a number of working groups from OSD to the services that are very focused on that problem, to include accreditation requirements now. Other questions?
Thank you. Hal Ravichet from... Move up away from the speaker. Thank you. Hal Ravichet from Janus Technologies in Silicon Valley in partnership with VT Milto right behind you. Okay, as I travel the world actively, talent is the major issue, okay? Talent in analytics. And that's a changing game every day. So it's a young person's game. You need to make sure that the people who are in front of your students are up to date. Last year's information is not good enough. The apps that are coming online that could get in to various systems through the IoT are also major threats. So what are you doing to bring in the latest information into the training part? Because talent is critical. And the salary structure in government may not be sufficient to attract the best talent in analytics.
So I think I've got this one. So at the cyber school, there is a concerted effort to make sure that our operators are informing the class. The curriculum changes as rapidly as possible to adapt to the technology and the emerging sort of techniques, tactics, and procedures of adversaries and best practices from industry coming in. We invite outsiders to come in and look, and we've also got some of our training contracted out with industry leaders to make sure that it's staying relevant. When you talk about the pay and the ability to attract people, here is the way we've seen this. And as we've gone out to places like Silicon Valley and looked at other places, our message is fairly simple. And that is, we are doing everything we can to make the pay structure and bonuses and incentives, higher than what they are right now. And again, great support, just having to work through some legislative pieces and some policy pieces to make that possible. But no matter what happens, there is always going to be a gap between what the government can pay you or what Army Cyber can pay you and what the civilian world can pay you. And what we say is, in that gap, what we fill it is all the things that keep us all in the military as well. And that's the people that you work with, the sense of purpose that it gives, and the sense of patriotism that you want to contribute back. And I think that's truly our competitive advantage when we're out there talking with people. Because what we say is, you've got unique cyber skills. Do you want to use that to make a cab show up quicker at a corner, or do you want to help us shut down ISIS beheading videos? And I think that's our advantage.
That is contracting, right? So you don't want the analysts knowing each other anyway, many of them, right? Because in key operations, so you contract out, and you can then compete with Silicon Valley salaries.
So, sir, I'm not saying we're not contracting, because we contract a significant amount of work, but it's not like that's a panacea, right? Contractors come with significant issues, not issues, but they come with restraints in what they can do. They can't deploy to a war zone. They can't, or at least in the contract. I mean, there are some, so contracting definitely plays a part, but I would caution against overemphasizing the role contractors can play.
The point I want to make, as we travel, we talk about technology and talent, but we add policy as well.
I agree.
And Snowden was an example of failed policy and failed technology.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you for your question. All right. Other questions? Go ahead.
Hi, Matthew Boehner from Defense Daily. I was just wondering about the plan to establish a national cyber range. Is this something where it's going to be a place for testing the force's ability to handle in different scenarios in a contested environment, or is it more to test different capabilities or new capabilities in a contested cyber environment?
So I think the answer is yes to all of those, but I'm not positive. I think the answer is yes, and then collectively, the system of cyber rangers that are being built across the Army have those capabilities nested within them, within that larger construct. So all of those things is the direction that we're moving out in.
Other questions? Over here.
Sir Donna Boyce, Headquarters Army Staff. You talked at the beginning about how we have a cyber branch now and different from all the rest of the stuff for soldiers. Is there any thought to having a cyber career field for civilians that would provide an extra layer of continuity and support for cyber operations?
Absolutely, ma'am. We're working on that right now. It is in the process of going through the process of approval.
And how are we doing on time? Got a question? We'll just keep going.
All right, hello, sir. Sorry, sir. John Anderson from AT&T. You talked about engaging with industry and getting industry partners to see what the latest and greatest, what all the R&D capital being expended is being used for. As you change sort of the shift of focus to look at some more of those solutions, how do you intend to change the accreditation and testing process? How are you actually going to certify those devices and those solutions for military networks?
It's a good question. So the risk management framework allows us to tailor the controls for bringing on commercial off-the-shelf capabilities into our network. And so no different than a GOTS solution. If it's a COTS solution, it goes to the same risk management framework process, which is a NIST process, which is, again, very tailorable. And I know that we're getting through the initial effort to accredit systems with risk management framework, but ultimately it should streamline bringing capabilities onto the network, as we've seen with some of the other federal agencies. Other questions? Conrad, did you have a question? Molly, did you have a question? Booz, you have a question.
How you doing, gentlemen? Colonel Rock Booz, Damo Cyber. Sir, General McGee, this one's for you. You had
That's fratricide. That's your own guy.
No, it's easy. You mentioned about partnering together with industry, and naturally in the military we have a program with training with industry where you're looking at something along the lines of industry training with Army, and how do you see that? How do you view that? And I think I'm just giving myself some work to do, because it's probably going to come back on me to put that together.
So I think there's great potential for both. So the train with industry programs we have right now, I think, need to continue to change. So we're actually embedded with cutting edge companies that are actually on the sort of forefront of innovation. And then I think we've got to find a way to be able to bring people to come and do, fellowships or something within the Army as well. As you know, the hardest stumbling block in all of that for bringing civilians in is the security clearance piece. But I definitely think that's where the opportunities lie moving forward.
We actually, there is actually a program where we can bring civilians into the federal government, and we've done it for the last couple of years on about 10 bodies per year prisoner exchange basis. So we'll send 5 military out to industry and bring 5 back into DOD. And so our allocations are very small, though. But what we've seen so far has been a lot of goodness, and so hopefully that will continue. We can expand that program.
And we're launching a pretty extensive internship program now that I think has a tremendous amount of long-term value in terms of finding students in colleges right now, attracting them, and then them making a commitment so they come and do internships with us. We work the security process for them over a series of a year, and then when they graduate, they come and work for Army Cyber writ large. So I think there's tremendous opportunities there.
Other questions? Okay. All right, go ahead. Last question. You want to use my mic? Here. We'll stand next to each other.
All right, Garrett, thank you. General, I didn't hear it in the body language, but I'm talking about insider threats. They are very significant. I'm working with John Grimes, you all know. He also shares my point of view, all right? Now, so you have to be careful who you trust. One person, unhappy they didn't get a promotion, unhappy with the White House, unhappy with some military decision, can cause tremendous damage. That's why I said earlier that the analysts in the most sensitive areas should not know each other. So I'm just sharing that with you. Insider threats.
Thank you. All right, other questions? Oh, Rob, you have a question. Pam has a mic.
Sir, Colonel Rob Parker, G6 user. At the opening of your remarks, you hit on the significant efforts with Windows 10 and how that was helping to better secure our networks. I was wondering, from your perspective in G6, where are we looking beyond that? Sort of what's the next thought process after that for sort of network access controls or other capabilities?
So one of the things immediately in front of us is really a holistic look at endpoint security, endpoint management, right? We have HBSS, host-based security system. We have Windows 10. We have, I'll say Titanium, we have that. And we have a number of other things that help us to lock down and secure and see the endpoints. But it's not all completely as synchronized as we'd like it to be, right? And so that is on our immediate, 50-meter target to get after. When I say 50-meter in the building, that's like FY18, FY19. That's how fast we move. But that's a big solution for us. It's very expensive, but it's a holistic look at the endpoint security, endpoint management, endpoint asset visibility for us. Step number one for us is to see ourselves. And so to be able to see ourselves, we have to get through the endpoint piece, which we are getting through.
So I just say, Rob, the other piece of this, and I think where there's some tremendous opportunities, although a lot of work still to be done, is as we start moving and keeping signature-based detection as our sort of baseline, but we start going to something where the data is being fed back to a big data platform that looks at a comprehensive analysis of the data to find behaviors or anything that is an anomaly, so we can start detecting that as threat activity within our network. Because signature-based only gets you so far, and the next step really is this integration with a big data platform to conduct analytics to be able to identify threat activities, especially if we're talking about a sophisticated nation-state actor who could be in our systems, bypassing a lot of the other lower levels of sort of security detection.
Yeah, and then I'll say, and beyond 18, 19 is, what's next for the campus area network, right? So what we're doing now, we used to call network modernization 5 years ago. And really, we're just upgrading switches and routers to harden the infrastructure. But to the extent that we can eliminate switches and routers, then you're eliminating vulnerability points on the network. And so we do know that there are other technologies that are out there that we can employ that would eliminate and get after, that area of vulnerability that we potentially have, whether it be passive optical networking or whether it be, software-defined networking, whatever it is, where you reduce the number of devices on the network that have elevated permissions required to get into it, which is back to the insider threat, or whether it be just, going out of STIG compliance because they're aging out. To be able to get rid of that helps us in the long run. So we're looking at that as well, but that's beyond 18, 19. Good question, though, Rob. Thanks. Other questions? Yes, Molly, you now have a question.
Sir, yesterday, General Morrison spoke a little bit more about the methodology going forward with purchasing, and that was he would, and the thought now is buy less more often. Can you tie that into cyber and that path forward as well?
Well, certainly, the standard acquisition cycle doesn't necessarily support the pace of technological innovation that's occurring out there. And so being able to take a smaller chunk in a smaller cycle, apply it, innovate from that, and then on the next iteration of this, evolve to the next technology. I mean, we're seeing it in all sorts of different things. First one that comes to mind is the defensive infrastructure we're trying to build, where its processing power is increasing dramatically. The size of it is decreasing. So the processing power increases, storage increases, but the size is decreasing, which makes it much more compact, much more deployable, much easier for us to get to support forward line of battle units that are out there doing tactical operations. And so I think that's the model that we want to start adopting as we're moving forward. Otherwise, we'll start instituting technologies that were state-of-the-art at the time that the contract was begun, but by the time it's actually fielded, it's obsolete.
Yeah, the whole idea is if you're going to field 100 items and you want to field them all at once, then they'll all go bad at the same time. We see that all the time, right? And so not a new concept. If you buy 20% a year, every year you'll have 20% new stuff. And yeah, 20% are going to have better stuff than the other 80%, but that's okay. We'll be okay with that. But at least we'll have the current stuff in the system, continually coming in. That's the idea. Good question. Other questions? No questions from, over here. Go ahead, Pam.
Sir, Captain Jonathan Cohen. Obviously, it would be great to eliminate all compromise of our networks, but in the event that there is a compromise, what is U.S. Army Cyber Command doing to create resiliency within our networks upon a compromise occurring?
Right, so you probably know you can't defend everything, right? That's a sure way to make sure that if you try to defend everything, you really end up defending nothing. So it's a combination of things. It's making sure that critical assets, and you've sort of done an analysis to make sure what's most important within your network, and that has multiple levels of security, but also redundancy built within it in case it's compromised. And then an agile system of mission command that allows you to respond against an adversary, both to counter the threat and then to make sure that you're still maintaining the network and being able to provide those services to whomever needs it. So both of those are being worked simultaneously. And many of the initiatives we've talked about today, whether it's getting behind the JRSS, whether it's Windows 10 migration, this DACO authority, all of these things are coming together to make us better at what we're doing. And I still think there's a lot of work for us to do in that as well.
Well, JP, fortunately, we've come to the end of our show. And maybe just a couple of points to reinforce. It's a team sport. That's why JP is standing next to the CIOG6 sign, and I'm standing next to the Army Cyber sign. But maybe to recap a few things, we've invested a lot in people, process, and technology to get after the cybersecurity, thing that we have to get after, which we have been for the last couple of years in a very good way. But we do have a long way to go, and so we can't do it without our industry partners. If you look at any of our comms closets, our tech control facilities, our data centers, our JNN shelters, our SSS shelters, it's all got commercial stuff in there, and so we know we can't do it without you. So I thank you for those of you in the industry for helping us do what we do. Those in uniform, those that have served, thank you for your service. JP, any closing thoughts?
So I'll just say, the close cooperation between the CIOG6 and Army Cyber. Just last Thursday, I spent all day long in the CIOG6 offsite where I sat there and we had a great conversation. Those who are building the network need to be talking with those who are defending the network. It's just a very natural. And then as I look around the crowd here, about half of you guys have helped teach me all the things that I'm talking about now. So my thanks to you, and I appreciate all your support and continued support.
All right, thank you.